Forward. In today's turbulent political landscape, the questions of who should lead and who should have the power to vote have never been more pressing. Service equals citizenship. An introduction to Constitutional Stratocracy offers a fresh critical approach to answering these questions, proposing a system of governance where contribution to society forms the bedrock of citizenship and leadership. The premise is simple yet profound. Those who serve their community in meaningful ways, whether in military, healthcare, education, or other essential sectors, should have a greater stake in guiding our nation's future. This book introduces readers to the core principles of modern constitutional stratocracy, a model in which the privileges of citizenship, including the right to vote and hold office, are earned through service. It is not a dismantling of democracy, but rather a reframing of what civic responsibility should mean. In a world where power is often tied to wealth, influence, or popularity, stratocracy seeks to elevate those who actively contribute to the collective good. It represents an antidote to the apathy and disenfranchisement many of us feel toward our current system, which often rewards fame or fortune over real merit. As an introductory piece, Service Equals Citizenship is not intended to provide exhaustive legal frameworks or implementation roadmaps. Instead, it serves as a broad overview, establishing the foundational ideas and guiding principles of contemporary stratocracy. The arguments within are meant to provoke thought, challenge preconceived notions of citizenship, and offer a vision of governance that values merit, accountability, and contribution above all else. It is a starting point for deeper exploration into how we can reshape our institutions to better reflect these ideals. The chapters ahead also anticipate and address potential criticisms, fears of authoritarianism, militarism, or inequality. These concerns are natural when discussing any shift in governance, but they are not insurmountable. This book offers reasoned responses to these critiques, emphasizing that stratocracy is not about concentrating power in the hands of a few, but rather empowering those who serve, regardless of their background or wealth. The emphasis on inclusivity through service paths, whether in civil or public sectors, ensures that stratocracy adapts to the strengths and talents of our diverse population. Service Equals Citizenship is a timely and essential read for anyone disillusioned with the status quo. It invites readers to think critically about the relationship between service and citizenship, and to consider the value of a society where contribution defines civic voice. As you turn the pages, you'll find that this is just the beginning of a larger necessary conversation. A conversation about how we can create a more just, accountable, and inclusive system of governance. This book doesn't provide all the answers, but it asks the right questions and paves the way for a thoughtful, informed dialogue about our collective future.
Chapter 1. The Fall of Our Republic. 1. The Rot of Political Careerism and Unelected Bureaucrats.
Our republic, once a fortress of representative democracy, has been eroded to such a point that it would no longer be recognizable by our forefathers. Poisoned from within, corroded by career politicians and the unchecked power they've accumulated, something we the people can no longer ignore. These politicians who claim to serve our interests instead serve themselves unapologetically, protecting their power and expanding their influence, while foreign and domestic threats take advantage of our weakening system. This isn't conjecture, it's our new reality, reflected in the actions of our elected leaders and the unelected bureaucrats who shield them from accountability. Let's look at some relevant examples. Nancy Pelosi, the 52nd Speaker of the House, has amassed substantial wealth during her decades in office, benefiting from a system that allows lawmakers to invest in stocks of companies affected by her legislation. Despite calls for reform, she's continually resisted efforts to prohibit stock trading by members of Congress. This blatant conflict of interest shows the true priorities of her and politicians like her. Self-enrichment. Mitch McConnell, the Republican minority leader within the Senate, has also used his position not to serve the public, but to entrench corporate dominance, particularly through his defense of the Citizens United decision by SCOTUS in 2010. This federal ruling opened the floodgates for dark money, allowing corporate interests and billionaires to exert an unseen, unregulated influence over American politics. But the threat to us extends beyond this political corruption, weaponized through the very institutions designed to protect us. Three-letter agencies, such as the FBI, CIA, and NSA, which have been used as political tools by career politicians and unelected leaders, openly target citizens and political opposition to maintain the swamp's status quo. Take the case of Edward Snowden, an intelligence contractor and whistleblower who revealed the vast extent of the National Security Agency's NSA domestic surveillance programs. Snowden's leaks exposed that the NSA was, and still is, collecting massive amounts of data on American citizens, without our knowledge or consent, under the guise of national security. Snowden's revelations demonstrate how three-letter agencies have become tools of mass surveillance, watching every citizen as though they be potential enemies of the state. The fact that the NSA's actions were hidden from the public and approved by unelected officials shows the creeping authoritarianism behind a thin veil of democracy. Next, and more recently, consider the Steele dossier, a document that became the catalyst for an FBI investigation into Donald Trump's alleged ties to Russia. Pushed for by both Hillary Clinton and Mr. Bruce Orr, a member of the Obama administration, and funded by Democratic opposition research spearheaded by Orr's wife, the Steele dossier was unverified and filled with uncorroborated information, yet it became a key piece of evidence that triggered a years-long investigation into Donald Trump's fabricated ties to Russia in the 2016 election. Regardless of one's stance on Trump, the dossier highlights how unelected officials can be influenced by partisan interests. The FBI's willingness to launch an investigation based on baseless evidence reveals how political motivations can distort the impartiality of our highest law enforcement institutions. The Steele dossier wasn't just an investigative tool, it was a political weapon wielded against opposition to the status quo of elitism in American politics. The FBI's control over social media adds another layer to the problem. The Twitter files released by billionaire philanthropist Elon Musk revealed that the FBI pressured Twitter and other social media companies to moderate and suppress content during the 2020 election, specifically regarding the controversy surrounding Hunter Biden's laptop. Although framed as a measure to combat misinformation, this control extended far beyond legitimate concerns. By having a hand in deciding which information should be restricted or promoted, the FBI effectively influenced the public narrative, suppressing information deemed harmful to specific political interests. The overall issue here isn't just about managing disinformation, it's about unelected bureaucrats in charge of powerful agencies acting as gatekeepers of public discourse, manipulating what we, the average citizen, can see and hear. The collusion between tech companies and law enforcement agencies represents a dangerous shift towards censorship and control, targeting dissenting voices and steering political outcomes. These agencies, once trusted to protect our republic, have become political instruments, turning on the very citizens they are meant to defend. Career politicians and bureaucrats alike now wield these tools against their opposition and us, turning institutions of justice into arms of political retribution. One of the most troubling examples of three-letter agencies being seen as political tools is the FBI raid on Project Veritas journalist James O'Keefe's home in 2021. The raid occurred in relation to an investigation of the theft of Ashley Biden's diary, President Joe Biden's daughter. Ashley Biden's diary, which was reportedly obtained by Project Veritas, allegedly contains personal reflections about her life, struggles with addiction, and notably troubling allegations of inappropriate showers with her father throughout her childhood. These claims, while not independently verified, raise sensitive questions about the FBI's aggressive pursuit of such a case, including the raid on the homes of journalists connected to the diary, sparking controversy regarding the truth of these allegations. Critics argue that the FBI's response was greatly disproportionate and appeared to be an effort to protect a sitting president from political embarrassment and criminal persecution, rather than being a legitimate legal matter. This incident further exemplifies how three-letter agencies are used to target and intimidate opposition, particularly journalists, while also suppressing damaging stories about those in power.
2. Legislative inefficiency.
Then there's the farce of legislative process that has become a machine of bloated, incomprehensible bills, serving to confuse rather than serve. What was once a relatively transparent system, where the average citizen could understand the core principles behind a proposed law, has devolved into a labyrinth of special interests, amendments, and loopholes buried within hundreds or even thousands of pages of dense legal jargon. Worse, these complex laws often include hidden provisions entirely unrelated to the bill's main subject. One example, known as pork barrel spending, is a practice involving lawmakers sneaking in funding for pet projects or special interests that have nothing to do with the original bill, leading to the passage of vast amounts of unnecessary or harmful spending with little to no scrutiny. This practice has become the norm, where legislation is so convoluted and lengthy that even experts struggle to interpret them fully. The result is a growing disconnect between us and our representatives. In a true republic, legislation needs to be simple enough that any citizen can understand it. We shouldn't need a law degree to grasp the rules that govern our lives. More troubling still is how this intentional inefficiency creates opportunities for further corruption. When bills are packed with unnecessary amendments, politicians, lobbyists, and special interest groups find it easier to manipulate. They target the hidden corners of these massive documents, ensuring that their agendas slip through unnoticed amid the flood of bloated information. This is unacceptable.
3. The manipulative uniparty and the dangers of divisive rhetoric.
For years, Americans have been sold the illusion of choice between the Democratic and Republican parties. But behind the scenes, these factions operate as two sides of the same corrupt coin. An elite class of career politicians, unelected bureaucrats, and corporate power brokers who, despite their public disagreements, share one primary goal: maintaining their control. These individuals pretend to oppose each other in public, but in truth, their greatest fear is a true outsider shaking up their system. To prevent that, they distract, divide, and suppress. The most effective weapon of the uniparty is to manufacture division. By stoking partisan hatred on issues like race, gender, and class, they ensure Americans fight each other instead of turning their ire toward those in power. Senators Mitt Romney and Joe Manchin are two prime examples of this manipulative behavior. Despite their public affiliations with opposing parties, their actions often protect the same corporate interests. Romney, known for criticizing his own party, votes for policies that maintain the status quo of the political elite. Similarly, Manchin, who markets himself as a centrist, routinely thwarts progressive reforms that challenge corporate interests. Though appearing to clash on policy, both these politicians continually ensure the survival of their uniparty. As Americans are caught up in these partisan debates, inflation continues to soar, wages stagnate, and the cost of basic necessities have become unbearable. Housing prices have skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible for the average American to afford a home. The uniparty talks endlessly about affordable housing, but the reality is their policies favor corporate developers and real estate moguls over their constituents. The housing crisis is made worse by continually rising inflation and stagnant wages. While home prices and rent soars, wages have barely budged, creating a growing gap between what they earn and what they need to live. This isn't just an economic problem, it's a deliberate strategy by the elite to keep Americans focused on survival rather than prosperity. When families are struggling to pay rent or buy groceries, they are too overwhelmed to demand political change or challenge the corrupt system that keeps them down. A clear example of this blame game is seen further in the leadership structure of both parties, such as Nancy Pelosi's and Mitch McConnell's policy decisions. Pelosi publicly criticizes Republicans for favoring corporate interests, while McConnell accuses Democrats of reckless spending. Yet both Pelosi and McConnell supported the CARES Act, providing billions in relief to large corporations and real estate firms during the COVID-19 pandemic, while offering limited assistance to struggling families. This bipartisan agreement ensured the wealthiest interests were protected, while the average American was left behind in our economic downturn. Despite their public disagreements, both career politicians have a long history of backing policies that benefit the elite while doing little to address the root causes of national debt, inflation, and unaffordable housing. This brings us to the next point.
4. The threat of an uninformed electorate.
A healthy republic relies on an informed, engaged electorate, but today's reality throughout our nation is far from that ideal. The Uni Party has manipulated our system, creating an electorate overwhelmed by economic hardship and disinformation. The result? A nation where the people are too focused on survival to challenge growing corruption and inequality. Meanwhile, the Uni Party ensures that Americans remain disinformed. The media, backed by their corporate overlords, keeps the focus on culture wars and partisan squabbles, distracting from real issues. Instead of meaningful debates about affordable housing or inflation, the conversation is dominated by rhetoric designed to divide and distract. The most dangerous outcome of this struggling and disinformed electorate is the erosion of accountability. In 2023, as inflation soared and millions of Americans struggled with the post-pandemic rising cost of living, Congress passed a debt ceiling deal that protected corporate tax breaks and preserved needless military spending. Leading politicians like Kevin McCarthy, Chuck Schumer, and President Joe Biden were key architects of this agreement, which slashed programs meant to support low-income Americans, such as food assistance, while continuing to prioritize the interests of the wealthy. Despite public outcry over these misplaced priorities, media coverage focused more on the partisan conflict between Republicans and Democrats rather than addressing the bipartisan protection of corporate greed. This erosion of accountability isn't limited to politicians. It extends into our corrupt judicial system, where the law is often manipulated to protect those in power rather than serve the public good.
5. The corruption of the American judicial system.
One of the clearest examples of judicial protection for elites is the sealing of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein's case, particularly Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. Judge Allison J. Nathan, who presided over Maxwell's trial, made the decision to keep Maxwell's infamous Little Black Book sealed, citing privacy concerns for third parties. The book, which contains the names of nearly 2,000 individuals, including political figures and celebrities, has been a topic of public fascination. Despite this, the court prioritized confidentiality over transparency, ensuring that powerful associates of Epstein remain shielded from our scrutiny. This decision is a prime example of how the judiciary protects elites from public exposure. The lack of transparency, especially in a case involving such high-profile individuals, reflects the deep flaws in a system that should prioritize justice. This protection of elites isn't isolated either. This corruption goes as far back as 2005. In the case of Town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that police officers are not constitutionally required to protect individuals, even when those individuals face direct harm. The case revolved around Jessica Gonzalez, whose children were murdered after police failed to enforce a restraining order against her estranged husband. Writing for the majority, Justice Antonin Scalia held that police have no duty to act, thus reinforcing the idea that law enforcement agencies are not liable for failing to protect citizens. Furthermore, police officers are shielded from accountability through the legal doctrine of qualified immunity, which protects them from personal liability in civil suits, even when their actions or inactions result in harm and destruction of citizens and property. This creates an impenetrable shield for law enforcement officers, allowing them to evade consequences for their misconduct or negligence, further reinforcing a culture of unaccountability within our justice system. This misuse and abuse of power highlights a system that prioritizes the interests of the powerful over genuine reform to the benefit of our nation, allowing corruption to thrive both domestically and abroad.
6. The drain of undeserved aid.
As our economy weakens, legislative corruption spreads, and three-letter agencies are weaponized against us, we're being pitted against each other while billions of our taxpayer dollars are quietly funneled overseas with little to no transparency or accountability. Our nation has long been the primary financial supporter of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, covering an outsized share of the organization's overall defense budget. In 2023, the United States was contributing 22.1% of NATO's collective funding, amounting to approximately $685 million annually for NATO's operating costs, not including the additional billions spent on military deployments and exercises within Europe. This is despite the fact that other NATO members have continually failed to meet their pledged spending. Many European countries, including Germany and France, fall short of this target, leaving us to carry the financial burden of defending their nations, with Poland being the only country to surpass our annually required contributions. Beyond direct contributions, our nation spends tens of billions of dollars each year on military operations in support of NATO missions. The Pentagon's budget for European defense initiatives, such as the European Deterrence Initiative, was $3.8 billion in 2023 alone. This commitment has continued to grow as tensions with Russia and other geopolitical threats loom over the region, stoked further by the actions and rhetoric of our corrupt politicians. Despite the strain on domestic resources, we are expected to fund the greatest share of NATO's defense strategy, a burden disproportionately and unnecessarily shouldered by our country. And while we are increasingly burdened with funding foreign aid initiatives, some of the very nations receiving these funds, such as Ukraine and Israel, are mired in deep-seated corruption themselves. The billions funneled to these countries are often absorbed into murky systems rife with political misconduct, raising questions about whether we are unwittingly propping up corrupt regimes instead of supporting legitimate efforts to stabilize these regions.
7. Corruption in Ukraine, Zelensky and the oligarchs.
We've poured over $113 billion in aid to Ukraine in its fight against Russia, but the cloud of corruption looming over Ukraine's government has cast doubt on whether our tax dollars are being used responsibly. While Volodymyr Zelensky is often portrayed as a stalwart defender of democracy, his presidency has not been immune to the corrupt influence of oligarchs and entrenched political elites who have long plagued Ukraine's political landscape. One of the key scandals involving Zelensky dates back to the Pandora Papers leak published in 2021, which revealed that Zelensky and several of his close associates have offshore accounts and secret holdings worth millions. The leaked documents expose how Zelensky, who rose to power on an anti-corruption platform, had been connected to networks of shell companies registered in tax havens like the British Virgin Islands. These financial holdings were not disclosed during his campaign, raising concerns about his transparency and integrity. As our politicians continue to send military and financial aid, concerns are mounting about how much of our tax dollars are being properly utilized. Reports of Ukrainian officials involved in misappropriating funds intended for defense and humanitarian relief are becoming harder and harder to ignore, and their war has only exacerbated Ukraine's historical struggle with corruption, leaving many to wonder whether we are lining the pockets of corrupt elites instead of defending the sovereignty of a struggling nation.
8. Israel's Prime Minister and the funding of Hamas.
Another example is Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister, who has long been a controversial figure in both Israeli politics and international diplomacy. To this day, Netanyahu is currently embroiled in multiple corruption investigations, in trials involving bribery, fraud, breach of trust, and the violation of human rights. But beyond the well-known scandals of accepting lavish gifts and attempting to manipulate media coverage in his favor, Netanyahu's role in allegedly facilitating the rise of Hamas in Gaza stands as one of the most troubling elements of his entire legacy. Hamas, which the U.S. and many other nations designate as a terrorist organization, has been responsible for numerous rocket attacks on Israeli and Palestinian civilians and has led to perpetual conflict in the region. Yet Netanyahu's government has been accused of indirectly funding Hamas for political gain, allowing the group to grow as a counterbalance to the more moderate Palestinian Authority, PPA, led by Fatah, formerly the Palestinian Liberation Movement. Netanyahu's strategic goal in this alleged funding was to weaken the PA by bolstering Hamas, a move that critics argue was designed to keep the Palestinian leadership fractured. A divided Palestinian front makes it easier for Netanyahu's government to argue against peace negotiations or compromises with a fractured Palestinian body politic. Several reports have indicated that Netanyahu's government allowed millions of dollars from Qatar to flow into Gaza, money that was intended for humanitarian aid, but was allegedly diverted by Hamas to fund its military operations. This funding arrangement has been described by insiders as a cynical political tactic. By propping up Hamas, Netanyahu is able to present Israel as being in a constant state of conflict, justifying his hardline policies, military action, and his strongman leadership. This strategy not only undermines the Palestinian Authority, open to negotiating peace with Israel, but it also perpetuates continual violence throughout Gaza, increasing tensions and leading to further bloodshed on both sides. While Israel remains a key U.S. ally in the Middle East, the corruption scandals surrounding Netanyahu raise difficult questions about the effectiveness and morality of our continued financial support. We are funding Israel's military while Netanyahu's government is potentially fueling the very conflict it claims to be defending against. The lack of transparency and accountability within Israel's government further complicates this justification for sending billions of our tax dollars in aid every year, especially as Netanyahu faces trial for a laundry list of international charges.
9. The cost of political decay.
As we've explored these small cases in a vast web of corruption and inefficiency in both foreign and domestic policies, one thing becomes abundantly clear. We the people are paying the price. American citizens are being left behind as career politicians enrich themselves and misuse taxpayer funds, both at home and abroad. Overpaid politicians, such as Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham, flaunt lavish homes and lifestyles while we, their constituents, struggle with rising costs and stagnant wages. Schumer, known for his Upper East Side residence and close ties to Wall Street, exemplifies how career politicians have become disconnected from the everyday American. Meanwhile, Graham, with his multiple properties and frequent luxury travels, showcases how public servants have turned their offices into personal enrichment opportunities, more concerned with maintaining power than serving. While they champion costly foreign aid packages, their own wealth grows, all while millions of us face financial insecurity. This contrast between the political elite and the average citizen rightly exacerbates our distrust in government institutions. We are forced to watch helplessly as our leaders benefit from insider deals, corporate ties, and unchecked power while neglecting the very issues plaguing this country that they themselves create. Why have we yet to do anything about it?
9. Building a nation that serves society.
The signs of decay are unmistakable, and the data drives home the urgency for change. Decades of leadership dominated by career politicians have eroded public trust, with public confidence in Congress plummeting to a record low of 7% in 2023, according to Gallup polling. This decline is mirrored by the unchecked growth of unelected bureaucratic power, as exposed by whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and the expanding power of intelligence agencies and their unelected leaders. Meanwhile, the average American struggles under economic strain, with the cost of housing increasing by 40% from 2015 to 2023, pushing homeownership out of reach of the lower and middle class. As leaders remain disconnected from the realities that their constituents face, our republic edges closer to anarchy and collapse. These numbers, combined with the rampant misuse of taxpayer funds and the widening economic gap between the governed and governing, clearly illustrate the urgent need for a new system. Our current system is failing, and the solution is clear. It's time for this model to die, making way for a new system founded in service-based citizenship. Only those who have demonstrated a commitment to our country should hold the right to lead, vote, or influence legislation. This shift will do more to ensure that those in power truly represent the people and are driven by duty and sacrifice, not self-interest or entitlement. It is time for constitutional stratocracy.
9. Conclusion.
Citizenship should not be allowed as birthright, but a privilege earned. By ensuring that only those who have demonstrated true commitment can vote or hold office, this system prioritizes sacrifice, responsibility, and national interest over self-serving politics.
The price we pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Plato.
Chapter 2. A New Foundation. 1. Introduction.
Contemporary stratocracy, by its very nature, challenges the traditional notion of what it means to be a citizen. The concept is not merely about governance, but about redefining the very foundation of citizenship itself. At its core, stratocracy is built on the belief that only those who have demonstrated their proactive commitment to society through honorable service deserve the right to vote, hold office, and participate in the political process. This chapter will explore the essence of modern stratocratic foundations, focusing on service as the bedrock of citizenship and political voice.
2. Citizenship.
In a modern stratocracy, the privilege of citizenship is not a birthright, but something earned. This principle stems from the belief that true dedication to one's nation and community is demonstrated through tangible acts of service that benefit the collective. But what qualifies as honorable service? Honorable service is any role that proactively contributes to society's well-being on a day-to-day basis, characterized by selflessness, duty, and a willingness to place others' needs above one's own. It encompasses a wide range of professions, extending beyond the military. While the armed forces are one avenue, other critical sectors such as law enforcement, emergency services, healthcare, education, and infrastructure all fall within this definition. A teacher, for example, does more than pass on knowledge. They shape the future by preparing young minds to think critically and contribute to society. A firefighter puts their life on the line to save others, while a police officer maintains law and order, and a soldier protects the nation. Beyond these traditional roles, sanitation workers keep communities clean and healthy, ensuring public safety in ways often taken for granted. Linemen work tirelessly ensuring access to electricity, risking their very lives to maintain the infrastructure that sustains our daily life. Though their duties vary, each of these roles shares a commitment to the public good, and in a stratocracy, they are equally honored paths to obtaining one's citizenship. Citizenship is not simply a legal status. It is the manifestation of an individual's commitment to society, earned through actions that reflect sacrifice and responsibility. By reserving political rights for those who've served, stratocracy ensures that the people making decisions about governance have a vested interest in the welfare of our nation. This model prioritizes leaders and voters with a proven track record of service, weeding out those unfit to vote or lead.
3. The morality of a service-based body politic.
A core tenet of this foundation is that leadership is a duty reserved for those who have proven their willingness to serve others. Leadership is not a position of privilege, but one of responsibility, grounded in the belief that those who serve are best suited to govern. Service tests individuals in ways few other experiences can. Whether on the battlefield, in the classroom, or in an emergency room, those who serve face challenges that demand patience, resilience, and sacrifice. These experiences shape leaders who understand the gravity of their decisions and that impact on others. In contrast, the current democratic model of our nation often elevates individuals based on popularity, status, or wealth, rather than a proven ability to serve. In a stratocracy, leadership is something earned through service, not won by misplaced rhetoric or influence. This ensures that political power is held by those who understand the true meaning of responsibility and sacrifice, making leadership about fulfilling a duty to all the people they represent.
4. The differences between automatic and earned citizenship.
One of the greatest differences between a democratic system and a stratocracy is how citizenship is obtained. In our current democracy, citizenship is granted at birth, a right bestowed by circumstance rather than merit. This system is designed to be inclusive, giving every individual the right to vote and participate in the political process simply by virtue of their birthright. While it promotes equality in theory, this automatic citizenship often leads to disengagement. Many citizens, having received their political rights without having to contribute or serve, lack the personal connection to the responsibilities that come with these rights. The result is an electorate that is uninformed and indifferent. In contrast, stratocracy views citizenship as a privilege that must be earned. Rather than being born with the right to participate in governance, individuals must first demonstrate their commitment to society. This service, whether in the military, civil infrastructure, or other essential roles requires sacrifice, dedication, and an understanding of duty. Earning citizenship creates a direct bond between the individual and the nation, instilling a deeper sense of responsibility and engagement. Citizens in a stratocracy are not passive recipients of rights. They have actively worked to earn their voice, and this earned status makes them more likely to take their role seriously. This approach leads to a more informed and engaged electorate, one motivated by the long-term well-being of the nation as much as personal gain.
5. Civic responsibility and engagement.
By tying citizenship to service, stratocracy encourages active participation in the political process, fostering a more engaged and informed citizenry. Those who have served are more likely to engage with the political process because they have a personal stake in the nation's well-being. Having demonstrated their commitment through service, this sense of responsibility extends naturally to their role as voters and leaders. They vote with the understanding that their choices will have real consequences, not just for themselves, but for everyone, motivated by the common good rather than partisan divides. In a stratocracy, citizens are not merely beneficiaries of the state, they are contributors to it. This shared sense of responsibility leads to a more united and engaged society, capable of collectively addressing the challenges it faces with greater resolve.
6. Strengthening communal bonds through shared service.
One of the most compelling advantages of a stratocracy is in the way it fosters a stronger, more cohesive society by instilling a culture of selfless service and accountability. In a stratocracy, the concept of service becomes a shared value, transcending class, profession, and background, uniting citizens under a common goal: the betterment of our nation through contribution. This collective sense of duty fosters societal bonds that are often lacking throughout traditional democratic systems, while typically eroding divisions based on wealth, status, or privilege. The recognition of service fosters mutual respect and understanding between citizens of varying backgrounds. For example, in modern-day service peer groups, diversity is both an inherent characteristic and a strength, as service members come from various socioeconomic, racial, and cultural backgrounds. Yet they're united by a shared commitment to their common goal. This creates a unique environment where individuals who might otherwise never interact form close bonds built on mutual respect and trust. In training and operational units alike, soldiers learn to rely on each other regardless of their personal differences, fostering a sense of unity, transcending typical societal divisions. This experience of working and depending on peers from diverse backgrounds not only strengthens cohesion within the group, but also cultivates a broader understanding and respect for others. This dynamic shows how stratocracy, by emphasizing service, can harness the unifying potential of diversity in all sectors of society to the benefit of everyone.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly. Thomas Paine.
Chapter 3. Service equals citizenship.
The echo of gunfire rings through the dusty streets, and Corporal Davis dives behind a shattered concrete barrier. His heart pounds as his squad moves through narrow alleyways, each step a gamble with death. Back home, across the ocean, his younger brother Mark is in a different kind of battle. This one fought in the classroom. As a high school teacher, Mark shapes the next generation while combating ignorance, fostering young minds with the knowledge and critical thinking they'll need to build a future. Both brothers serve their nation, but in vastly different ways. One risks his life on foreign soil, while the other prepares civilians to lead on the home front. In a stratocracy, both paths are honored, but the path to citizenship is shaped by risks and sacrifices each face.
1. Introduction.
We've covered that in a contemporary stratocracy, service is the foundation of citizenship, but not all forms of service are equal in terms of risk and responsibility. Different roles contribute uniquely to society, and the path to citizenship should be determined by the level of sacrifice and commitment involved in each. This chapter explores diverse types of service, how time to citizenship is adjusted based on the risks inherent in each role, and the necessary reforms in civil and military institutions to ensure stability and accountability.
2. Diversity of service.
Individuals can earn citizenship through a variety of service roles, but these roles differ significantly in terms of the risks they involve. Stratocracy distinguishes between high-risk roles, where individuals face direct physical danger, and lower-risk roles that are essential but less hazardous. High-risk roles encompass those where life-threatening danger is an everyday reality. Soldiers in combat MOSs, for example, confront constant peril and mental anguish, whether in training or active conflict zones, facing enemy fire in hazardous environments. Likewise, beat cops patrolling high-crime neighborhoods regularly deal with violent offenders and respond to critical incidents like active shooter situations. Firefighters and EMTs, too, put their lives on the line each day, braving burning buildings and hazardous rescues to save civilians. These high-risk roles are marked by extreme physical and mental challenges. Individuals in these positions sacrifice their safety and mental health for the protection of others, making them eligible for a shorter path to citizenship due to the intense risks they face daily. Mid-risk roles, while not as life-threatening as high-risk positions, still carry substantial risks and vital responsibilities. Sanitation workers, for instance, manage waste in hazardous conditions, often dealing with dangerous chemicals or contaminated materials, preventing disease outbreaks, and maintaining public health and safety in cities and communities. Similarly, linemen tasked with maintaining and repairing power lines frequently work in extreme weather, including storms or natural disasters, facing the constant threat of electrocution or injury while restoring critical infrastructure. Both roles are essential to society's functioning. As a result, those in these fields require a moderate period of service to earn their citizenship, longer than high-risk roles but shorter than lower-risk ones. Lower-risk roles, while vital to society's function, carry minimal danger or risk. Teachers, for instance, shape future generations by imparting knowledge and fostering critical thinking, building the foundation for an informed and capable citizenry. Similarly, civil servants manage crucial aspects of public health, infrastructure, and government operations, ensuring the smooth functioning of society. Though these positions are essential to societal well-being, they lack the immediate risks associated with high and mid-risk roles, justifying a longer service requirement for citizenship. Note: administrative roles in the military and police, such as logistics, human resources, or internal investigations, are also categorized as lower risk, except in cases where combat soldiers are reassigned to these duties due to injury or other mitigating circumstances. Consequently, the time required to earn citizenship correlates directly with the level of risk and responsibility involved in an individual's vocation. This structure ensures that sacrifices made by individuals in high and mid-risk positions are recognized while maintaining a fair path to citizenship for those choosing to pursue lower-risk roles.
3. Examining some logical reforms of law enforcement and healthcare.
In a modern stratocratic framework, civil institutions must undergo significant reforms to prevent historic abuses of power, such as unionization abuse, favoritism, and, most critically, the unchecked authority that leads to issues like police brutality and misconduct in public services. These reforms are essential to ensuring that all civil servants are held to the highest standards of accountability and that their actions consistently serve the public good. A major issue in current law enforcement systems is the practice where police officers, after facing accusations of misconduct or abuse, simply leave one department and are easily hired by another. This practice, often referred to as department hopping, undermines accountability and allows problematic officers to evade the consequences of their actions while continuing to work in law enforcement. In a stratocratic system, this would be prevented through the creation of a national accountability database, expanded upon in later chapters. This database tracks the employment history, misconduct reports, and disciplinary actions of all civil servants, such as police officers. If an officer is found guilty of misconduct, such as excessive use of force, abuse of authority, or other violations of public trust, this information would be entered into the database and be accessible to all the public. Any officer with a proven record of serious misconduct would be automatically disqualified from future employment in any public service capacity and would forfeit all their rights to citizenship in perpetuity. Local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies would be required to consult the database before hiring any candidate, ensuring that only those with a clean, honorable record can continue in the profession. This transparency would close the loophole that allows abusive officers to move freely between departments or quietly resign, thus restoring public trust in our law enforcement institutions. Furthermore, police unions would be reformed to ensure they cannot shield troublesome officers. Unions would retain their role in protecting the rights of civil servants, but would not be allowed to interfere with investigations, discipline, or the dismissal of officers guilty of abuse. Reforms would make it clear that unions exist to protect workers from exploitation, not defend those who misuse their power. This change prevents unions from obstructing the termination of officers guilty of abuse or negligence, ensuring they cannot rely on union backing to evade the consequences for their actions or inactions. With these reforms, police unions would work to uphold the integrity of the profession rather than protecting bad actors. Furthermore, healthcare institutions would be reformed to prioritize accountability and the common good, while addressing a history of abusive medical personnel. The key issue in this civil industry is the current ability of medical professionals, after committing malpractice or abuse, to move between hospitals and healthcare institutions without facing consequences. This would be prevented using the National Accountability Database, as introduced in the law enforcement section, ensuring that medical professionals are held accountable. This system ensures that individuals with a history of abuse or negligence are barred from future medical practice, protecting patients from repeat offenders. Hospitals would be federally mandated to consult the database before hiring, ensuring that only qualified, ethical professionals continue in their roles. The transparency of this process would restore public trust in our healthcare system. Unions in healthcare would also be reformed to prevent them from shielding abusive or negligent medical professionals. These reforms would ensure that unions uphold the integrity of the medical profession and maintain accountability within healthcare institutions. To foster trust between hospitals and the communities they serve, there must be a high level of transparency regarding how healthcare institutions address complaints, medical errors, and malpractice cases. Hospitals would be required by law to publicly release regular reports detailing the number of complaints received, the outcomes of malpractice investigations, and any disciplinary actions taken against troublesome or negligent medical personnel. Moreover, the establishment of patient advocacy departments within hospitals would be required as well. These departments would serve as independent entities within each healthcare institution, providing patients with a direct line to report concerns, request information, or challenge medical decisions they feel are unjust or unethical. The advocacy teams would work to ensure that patient complaints are handled quickly and effectively.
4. Examining some logical reforms of education.
Education forms the backbone of any society, especially within a contemporary stratocratic system where citizens and civilians are expected to contribute meaningfully to the nation. However, modern education often falls short by prioritizing abstract knowledge over practical life skills and, in some cases, allowing ideological influences to infiltrate the institution. To foster a functional nation, education must be reformed to focus on practical, essential knowledge and skills that equip students for real-world challenges, while ensuring that classrooms remain neutral, fact-based environments. Many students leave school without the critical life skills necessary to navigate adulthood, instead having spent years memorizing facts or learning theories that hold little to no practical value in daily life. The core curriculum would place a strong emphasis on life skills such as financial literacy, critical thinking, communication, problem solving, and civic responsibility. Courses on managing personal finances, e.g., budgeting, taxes, loans, understanding the law, and navigating healthcare systems would become mandatory, equipping future citizens and civilians with the tools they need to thrive responsibly. Furthermore, schools would be mandated to offer more options for vocational and technical training, allowing students to pursue career paths that align with their interests and the needs of society. Whether in healthcare, skilled trades, or service-oriented roles, Vocational education will be prioritized as a legitimate and valuable alternative to traditional academic tracks. Basic education in health, nutrition, and physical fitness will be prioritized to help students make informed decisions about their well-being. Teaching the importance of mental health, exercise, and nutrition results in a healthier and more productive society, reducing future healthcare burdens on taxpayers. By shifting the focus to practical life skills, education better prepares students to navigate the complexities of adult life and encourages them to contribute positively to their communities. This kind of curriculum promotes problem-solving and self-sufficiency, qualities critical to a functioning stratocracy. To ensure that our education institutions remain focused on intellectual development free from personal or political biases, strict boundaries on curriculum content will be enforced, avoiding divisive and opinion-driven topics like identity politics or gender ideology. Teachers will be held accountable for adhering to this approved curriculum through periodic evaluations and monthly audits. Those found guilty of violating these standards would face disciplinary action dependent on the severity of the violation, up to and including suspension, imprisonment, and revocation of citizenship status in perpetuity. Furthermore, any teacher who violates these guidelines would be entered into the National Accountability Database, just as police officers and healthcare workers guilty of misconduct, ensuring that those who misuse their role in education cannot continue in the profession elsewhere. This reform promotes transparency and maintains educational integrity, ensuring that classrooms are places of learning rather than ideological platforms based on an educator's personal view. Parental involvement in shaping local curricula will also be encouraged through advisory councils, allowing for greater community oversight and trust. Schools will also not be permitted to prevent parents from observing the environment in which their children are taught, ensuring transparency and accountability. Parents will have the right to visit classrooms, review lesson plans, and monitor instructional content to ensure that their children are receiving a proper, unbiased education. While courses fostering critical thinking and debate will remain integral, encouraging students to independently explore multiple perspectives, these must be presented in a manner free from ideological manipulation, allowing parents to safeguard the integrity of their child's education. Note, polluting the minds of our children is as harmful as medical malpractice or police brutality because it undermines the very foundation and future of our society. While physical harm affects the present, educational malpractice distorts values, critical thinking, and decision-making in future generations. Teachers have a duty to foster independent thought, and when they push personal ideological agendas, they erode trust and create individuals ill-equipped to succeed. Just as a doctor's failure endangers lives, an educator's failure jeopardizes the nation's future.
5. Examining some logical reforms in military services.
One of the most frequent complaints from soldiers, regardless of gender, is toxic leadership. This includes micromanagement, favoritism, and a disconnect between officers and enlisted personnel. A significant contributor to this problem is the existing pathway that allows individuals to enter leadership positions directly through college programs or military academies, without having first served in enlisted roles. Many soldiers feel that leaders who haven't shared the same struggles, training, and experiences lack the necessary understanding to lead effectively. To address this issue, this shortcut to leadership will be eliminated. Any individual seeking to become a leader must start at the enlisted level, earning their way to officer ranks through experience and dedication. By starting from the ground up, future leaders will have a better understanding of the challenges their subordinates face, promoting a culture of respect and trust. This ensures that leadership is earned through merit and experience, not simply through arbitrary credentials. When soldiers know that their leaders have walked the same path, facing the same risks, enduring the same hardships, they are more likely to trust and respect them. Leaders who have risen through the ranks will have firsthand knowledge of the realities of military life, allowing them to make decisions that reflect an understanding of the enlisted experience. This helps foster unity and reduces the divide between officers and enlisted personnel, creating a more cohesive and effective fighting force. Moreover, implementing regular, anonymous evaluations from subordinates, peers, and superiors to assess leadership effectiveness would help identify toxic leaders early, allowing for retraining or removal if necessary. Leaders must be held accountable for their actions and the environments they create, ensuring that only those who promote a positive, respectful culture advance. By addressing toxic leadership and ensuring that all military leaders have served as enlisted soldiers first, the military fosters a culture of mutual respect and accountability. This reform ensures that leadership is based on merit and experience, eliminating the perceptions of favoritism or entitlement typical of modern officers, thus creating leaders who are better equipped to lead and inspire.
6. Who watches the watchers?
The protection of whistleblowers is fundamental to fostering accountability, transparency, and ethical behavior across all civil institutions, including law enforcement, healthcare, education, and government services. Whistleblowers play a crucial role in identifying and addressing abuses of power, corruption, misconduct, and systemic issues, ensuring that civil servants act in the best interests of the public. Without robust protections, these individuals are often silenced or retaliated against, allowing harmful practices to persist unchecked. Comprehensive legal protections for whistleblowers across all sectors would be implemented. These laws would ensure that any individual falling within this scope is fully protected by our institutions from retaliation. Whether the whistleblower is a police officer exposing misconduct, a civil servant highlighting fraud, or a healthcare professional reporting malpractice, they would be shielded from demotion, dismissal, harassment, or any other punitive action. Retaliation against whistleblowers would be treated as a serious offense. Institutions or individuals who attempt to punish or pursue whistleblowers would face strict legal penalties, including imprisonment and permanent revocation of their citizenship status. This would deter leaders from creating a culture of fear or silence and encourage the reporting of unethical behavior without fear of repercussion. Whistleblower protection not only serves the individual reporting the misconduct, but also reinforces public trust in civil institutions. By protecting those who expose wrongdoing, Stratocracy ensures that government agencies, healthcare systems, and other civil services operate transparently and in the public's best interest. Regular public reporting on whistleblower investigations would be mandated, creating an environment of accountability where unethical practices and corruption aren't allowed to thrive in secrecy. Consider the controversy surrounding Edward Snowden. Labeled a traitor by the current system, his actions resulted in no significant change to the very system he sought to reform. Instead of being hailed as a protector of the public interest, he faces severe retaliation from that system, living in fear of arrest or assassination even to this day. This model of Stratocracy emphasizes service to the public above all. Snowden, by exposing widespread abuses of power, acted in our interest, safeguarding civil liberties. Therefore, his actions would have been celebrated as a form of honor, aligning with the very ethos of governance through service. The public would have been informed of the results of investigations into the NSA's activities through regular mandated reports, bolstering public trust in the government's integrity. The contrast between Snowden's treatment in a democratic system and how he would have been protected under Stratocracy reveals the core truth. Governance must serve the people, not destroy their rights in the name of power. A system built on transparency, accountability, and the protection of individual freedoms ensures that civil liberties are not only preserved, but actively defended.
7. Conclusion.
Whether through the work of soldiers on the battlefield, teachers shaping young minds, or healthcare workers safeguarding public health, each individual's path to citizenship should be determined by the risks they shoulder and the responsibilities they uphold. Some of the reforms I've outlined aim to create a fairer and more transparent system where merit is rewarded and the abuse of power and authority is proactively punished. In a contemporary Stratocracy, trust in institutions is paramount, fostered by robust accountability measures like the proposed National Accountability Database, which we will cover further, and the protection of whistleblowers. Ultimately, this vision is one where our nation's strength comes from the integrity of its citizens, ensuring that those entrusted with our future have proven their dedication, earned their place, and serve with honor.
Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. John F. Kennedy.
Chapter 4. Ending Careerism and Partisan Politics.
For over a decade, Sarah had served her community as an EMT. She had spent countless nights responding to emergencies, saving lives, and putting the needs of others before her own. When the opportunity to run for local office arose, Sarah believed her record of service would resonate with voters. After all, who better to represent the people than someone who devoted her life to helping them? But her opponent was a career politician, a man who had held the seat for 20 years. He'd never worked in the trenches, never saved a life, but he knew how to navigate the political game. With deep ties to donors and a network of connections, he easily outspent Sarah, flooding the airwaves with advertisements and sound bites. When election day came, Sarah lost, not because she lacked the ability to lead, but because the system rewarded political survival over selfless service.
1. Introduction.
The modern political landscape in the United States has been defined in large part by the influence of media, money, and popularity. Candidates often rise to power based not on their qualifications or ability to lead, but on how well they can perform in front of cameras, appeal to broad, superficial public sentiments, and navigate a system where the highest bidder often wields the most influence. In a modern stratocracy, this system is replaced by one that elevates merit, service, and accountability above all else, ensuring that those in leadership positions have proven their dedication and competence through service to our nation. The following chapter dissects the flaws of popularity-based politics and offers a vision of how stratocracy shifts leadership selection from a popularity contest to a merit-based voting process. The chapter also explores how stratocracy can help to guard against elitism, placing checks on power through term limits and stringent accountability measures.
2. Modern politicians sell influence, not solutions.
Political campaigns are often about image rather than substance. Career politicians, such as the late Dianne Feinstein, Patrick Leahy, Chuck Grassley, Jerry Nadler, and Joe Biden, have remained in power for decades, often owing their longevity to their ability to secure funding and navigate the complexities of media coverage. Yet this endurance does not reflect their competence or service to the country. Rather, it highlights their skill in managing political machinery, driven by their personal connections, party loyalty, and financial backing. Media, both traditional and social, plays an outsized role in shaping their political fortunes. A candidate who can dominate news cycles, engage audiences on social media, and deliver sound bites that resonate with voters often find success, regardless of their lack of leadership qualifications. In the 2020 Democratic primaries, former Representative Tulsi Gabbard faced significant challenges, often sidelined by media and lacking establishment support. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, despite low polling, was able to surge past her, largely due to consolidated party backing and key endorsements. His eventual rise to the nomination reflected the deep influence of political connections rather than popular support. This contrast highlights how the establishment coalesced around Biden, sidelining candidates like Gabbard, who posed a challenge to the status quo while retaining popular support from Democratic voters, thus leading us to the next problem. Campaign finance is another major issue. Career politicians often rely on corporate donations, super PACs, and lobbyists to fund their campaigns, creating a system where the wealthiest candidates have the advantage over sensible ones. The vast amounts of money spent on these campaigns further distorts elections. It breeds corruption as elected officials, once in power, owe favors to donors who help them achieve victory. This results in legislation that caters to special interests rather than a public benefit. Popularity-driven elections also encourage identity politics, where voters often choose candidates who reflect their own sensationalist identity or personal beliefs rather than show an ability to lead. Politicians know this and cater to specific voter blocs by engaging in divisive rhetoric. Career politicians have thus mastered the art of manipulation to maintain their control, often at the expense of national unity and stability. In stratocracy, this corrupt system is replaced, Candidates must demonstrate their commitment to the nation through service before they can even consider running for office by law, thus reducing the influence of media, money, and divisive rhetoric.
3. Leadership comes from experience, not popularity.
The core advantage of a service-based system is that it ensures leaders are more than charismatic faces or skilled manipulators. These are individuals who've tangibly contributed to the strength and security of their nation. They understand firsthand the burdens and sacrifices that come with service, and this ingrained responsibility helps in guiding their decision-making. Unlike career politicians, whose primary goal is often re-election, stratocratic leaders prioritize the well-being of the nation because they have lived through the very challenges they seek to address. When a firefighter who has faced the ravages of wildfires or an EMT who has saved lives in critical moments runs for office, they bring a different yet crucial perspective. They understand that leadership is not about personal power or influence, but about upholding the safety, dignity, and prosperity of their people. In today's system, the closest many politicians come to experiencing hardship is during a re-election campaign. They craft carefully worded speeches, attend outlandish fundraising banquets, and participate in televised debates, all while insulated from the harsh realities faced by everyday citizens. A stratocracy changes this dynamic by elevating those who have demonstrated true resilience, resourcefulness, and integrity through service. Take, for instance, Tulsi Gabbard. Aside from being a former politician, she is also a combat veteran who'd served in the Hawaii Army National Guard, including 2 tours in the Middle East. Gabbard's time in uniform wasn't spent behind a desk. She experienced the realities of war firsthand, making life and death decisions in the field. This experience deeply shaped her worldview and her approach to policy. She understands, in ways many career politicians do not, the human cost of war and the heavy responsibility that comes with sending troops into battle. Her military service informed her foreign policy stance, prioritizing diplomacy and caution over reckless interventionism. When leaders like Gabbard are shaped by service, they develop a profound sense of duty and responsibility to their fellow citizens, making them less likely to be influenced by corporate interests or political factions. Instead, their decisions are guided by a genuine commitment to the nation's well-being.
4. Stifling elitism.
Elitism in modern politics is often rooted in insular circles of power, where connections, wealth, and influence determine who rises to prominence. Many are groomed from an early age, attending elite schools, joining exclusive social clubs, and securing the favor of wealthy peers. This creates a divide between them and the average citizen, a gap that breeds resentment and fuels distrust. While stratocracy cannot completely eradicate elitism, it significantly curtails its dominance. In a service-based society, power and influence are not handed out based on family name, financial backing, or social standing, but earned. There is no fast track to political power for the wealthy or well-connected. Instead, those who wish to lead must first prove themselves. And while service itself can carry its own prestige, it is earned respect, not inherited privilege. This makes the ruling class more accountable and prevents the dominance of an isolated elite removed from the everyday struggles of citizens and civilians. However, breaking the grip of elitism requires more than just enforcing strict service requirements. It demands structural safeguards to prevent power from festering. This is where strict term limits come into play.
5. One and done.
Term limits serve as a significant barrier to corruption. By restricting the length of time a leader can hold office, the system reduces the opportunities for entrenched political power. Leaders are given a limited window in which to enact meaningful change, focusing their efforts on personal legacy and governing effectively, rather than becoming mired in the cycle of re-election. This shift reduces, though does not eliminate, the inclination to pander to donors or media outlets, as the need to continuously curry favor for future elections diminishes greatly. Additionally, this limit makes it much more difficult for politicians to exploit the revolving door between public office and lucrative private sector positions. While it may not fully eliminate post office opportunities, the reduced tenure and the emphasis on service over political longevity decrease the likelihood of politicians leveraging their position. The end goal of public service thus becomes more aligned with serving the nation, rather than using the office as a springboard to personal enrichment. By enforcing strict term limits, modern stratocracy restricts the rise of long-term career politicians, ensuring leadership roles are viewed as a strictly temporary responsibility rather than a lifelong entitlement. This change opens the door to fresh perspectives and innovative thinking, qualities lacking in long-standing political figures. But even still, there's another aspect to address, leading us into our next discussion: financial exploitation. The current system often enriches public officials at the expense of the people they serve. Let's examine how a stratocratic system keeps politicians focused on service.
6. Serving the nation, not yourself.
In the United States, politicians often enter office with modest means and leave with substantial personal fortunes. This disparity between entering and exiting wealth is not a coincidence. It is the direct result of a system that allows corrupt public servants to exploit their positions for personal gain, whether through high salaries, insider knowledge, or lucrative post office ventures. For instance, it is well documented that members of Congress consistently outperform the stock market, raising suspicions of insider trading or at least unfair access to privileged information. These financial gains are not simply byproducts of public service. They are a symptom of a corrupt system. In a contemporary stratocratic system, further amendments protecting citizens and their inalienable rights would expand upon the concept of service-driven leadership. One such amendment, relevant to this topic specifically, would mandate complete financial transparency for all public officials, both during and after their tenure. This amendment would require that all assets, income, and financial dealings of politicians be publicly disclosed in real time. This transparency guarantees that no leader abuses their position to secretly enrich themselves, exploit insider knowledge, or accept covert financial backing, thereby undermining their duty to serve. Additionally, the amendment would ensure that politicians are paid no more than the average median salary of the city, district, state, or commonwealth they represent. By capping their salaries to match the economic conditions of their constituents, the amendment directly incentivizes public officials to improve the prosperity of the communities they serve, as their own compensation would be tied to the overall economic well-being of their constituents. Furthermore, this amendment eliminates a politician's ability to abuse tax dollars for personal benefit, a common issue obscured by corrupt systems. Lavish perks, excessive travel budgets, or hidden personal expenses funded by taxpayers would be prohibited. All public spending would be transparent and subject to public scrutiny. This provision reinforces the stratocratic principle that leadership is a position of trust and service, not exploitation. By making this amendment unchangeable in perpetuity, stratocracy ensures that public service remains a role grounded in accountability, transparency, and a shared stake in the well-being of the nation. This amendment solidifies the foundation of a governance system where leaders are genuinely committed to serving the people. With financial exploitation curbed, the focus shifts to another fundamental flaw in our political system: our ignorance that allows partisan politics to thrive.
7. Breaking the chains of partisan ignorance.
In a stratocracy, the elimination of partisan ignorance is not just an incidental benefit. It is a necessary outcome of a system that values competence and informed decision-making. The root cause of partisan ignorance in our country is a political landscape where emotional appeals, identity politics, and media manipulation take precedence over facts, policy, and reasoned debate. Stratocracy is designed to counteract this by fundamentally shifting the way leadership is chosen. Stratocracy eliminates the culture of blind loyalty to political parties by removing the very structure that allows career politicians and media-backed candidates to exploit voter ignorance. Service-oriented individuals are far more difficult to mislead because they've experienced the challenges of governance, crisis management, and public service firsthand. They know what leadership requires and are less likely to be influenced by divisive rhetoric or partisan disinformation. By ensuring that only those who have proven their dedication to the nation can vote, Stratocracy replaces ignorance with informed decision-making, creating a voter base that values competence over charisma.
8. Conclusion.
As we dismantle the shackles of careerism and partisan politics, we open the door to a governance system where public service is honored, merit is rewarded, and the voices of those who have truly given to their country shape its future. Stratocracy is more than just a break from our corrupt past. It is a foundation for a future where leadership is synonymous with sacrifice, accountability, and unwavering commitment to the common good. In this new era, the halls of power will no longer echo with the ambitions of self-serving politicians, but with the wisdom and integrity of those who have earned their voice.
The best way to predict our future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln.
Chapter 5. A Higher Standard. 1. Introduction.
In the grand stage of governance, where power, influence, and ambition converge, ensuring that our leaders uphold integrity and fairness becomes a vital task. Enter the proposed fourth branch of government, the Civil Oversight Branch. This branch is not just a theoretical construct, but a dynamic force designed to breathe new life into our political system. In this chapter, we will explore how this branch enforces ethical leadership and political accountability. We'll also examine the civic code of conduct that guides its operations and the crucial role of the National Accountability Database in supporting this essential mission.
2. The Civic Oversight Branch.
This Civil Oversight Branch, COB, embodies the essence of citizen-led vigilance, a sentry stationed at the gates of our political and civil military institutions, tasked with the formidable duty of monitoring the conduct of our leaders, both elected and appointed. The COB represents the vigilant eye of the populace, ensuring that those who wield power remain within the bounds of ethical conduct. To grasp the magnitude of the COB's role, one must understand its investigative arsenal. Equipped with sweeping authority, the COB can summon documents, interrogate witnesses, and even initiate proceedings against those suspected of transgressions. This power is not merely theoretical, it is a practical tool employed to unveil the truth and hold the powerful accountable. The Office of the Inspector General, while integral to our current oversight framework, often struggles with limitations that impede its effectiveness. IG offices are typically housed within federal agencies, creating potential conflicts of interest and bureaucratic constraints. Their reports, though valuable, can be stymied by internal resistance or political interference. Moreover, the IG's focus is usually limited to specific agencies or functions, which may leave gaps in oversight across the broader governmental spectrum. In contrast, the COB, as an independent government branch, is designed to operate with a higher degree of autonomy and transparency. Its citizen-led approach ensures that oversight is not only impartial, but also directly responsive to public concerns. The COB's mandate to monitor all branches of government, including both elected and appointed officials, ensures a comprehensive approach to accountability that the IG's more fragmented structure may lack. Supporting the COB is the National Accountability Database, NAD, and the Civic Code of Conduct, CCOC.
3. The National Accountability Database.
The National Accountability Database, NAD, is an extensive repository dedicated to tracking abuses of authority by those in service. This database functions as a critical tool for ensuring accountability, focusing solely on individuals who have misused their authority. The NAD is not concerned with the routine actions of all public servants, but zeroes in on clear instances of abuse. By documenting these breaches, the NAD provides a transparent and publicly accessible record that aids in investigations and supports the COB's mission. Its openness to public scrutiny ensures that any misconduct is exposed to the light of day, reinforcing the principles of transparency and accountability. Public access to the NAD means that every instance of authority abuse is available for review, allowing citizens to remain informed and engaged in holding their leaders accountable. This transparency not only deters potential misconduct, but also fosters trust in the system, ensuring that breaches of authority are met with appropriate invisible consequences. Let's look at an example scenario of Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson has a history of serious ethical violations and is being investigated for malpractice. Despite resigning, Johnson is found guilty, and his record is flagged for severe misconduct. The NAD documents Johnson's violations and the revocation of his citizenship. This record includes all relevant details of the investigation, making the misconduct public and permanent. This transparency ensures that the record is visible to all, including future employers and regulatory bodies, reinforcing accountability. The revocation of citizenship functions like a permanent disqualification, akin to a predator registry. Johnson is barred from any future public service roles, to include voting, and the misconduct remains part of the public record indefinitely. Each sector, civil, emergency services, law enforcement, and military, has its own oversight mechanisms and standards. The NAD complements these mechanisms by providing a central repository of documented abuses. For example, military misconduct recorded by the NAD is accessible for review by military oversight bodies, while law enforcement abuses are similarly available to police oversight committees. This integration ensures that sector-specific oversight bodies can effectively utilize NAD records to enforce accountability and maintain high standards of conduct. In essence, the NAD's design and operations ensure that it effectively covers all public service roles by providing a comprehensive, transparent, and permanent record of authority abuse. Its ability to integrate with sector-specific standards and oversight mechanisms enhances its effectiveness in maintaining integrity and accountability across civil, emergency, law enforcement, and military roles. Through these measures, the NAD not only addresses immediate issues like department hopping, but also ensures long-term transparency and accountability by preserving and publicly sharing records of misconduct and forfeited citizenship. When citizens can review detailed records of authority abuse, they become more informed and empowered, driving a heightened sense of responsibility and vigilance. This transparency encourages political behavior that aligns with public expectations as leaders, and public servants are aware their actions are subject to ongoing scrutiny. As a result, there is a greater impetus for reforms in ethical conduct, as officials in these sectors strive to avoid public backlash and maintain their legitimacy. With the National Accountability Database, NAD, providing a transparent and comprehensive record of authority abuse among citizenry, the next critical element in ensuring ethical governance from political leaders in the Civic Code of Conduct, CCOC.
4. UCMJ, but for politicians.
The Civic Code of Conduct's exclusive application to politicians is rooted in the principle that public officials are held to a higher standard due to the nature of their roles. Politicians, by virtue of their positions, wield significant power and influence over public policy and governance, impacting the lives of millions of citizens. Consequently, it is both reasonable and necessary to demand elevated standards of conduct from those who represent the public and make critical decisions affecting society at large. Politicians are entrusted with responsibilities that require a high degree of trust and ethical behavior. The rigorous process established by the Civic Code of Conduct, CCOC, ensures that this trust is not taken for granted. By preventing resignation until allegations are thoroughly investigated, the system upholds the integrity of the office and the accountability of the office holder. This approach is designed to prevent individuals from evading scrutiny through resignation and ensures that any proven misconduct is addressed with appropriate severity, including imprisonment, revocation of citizenship, and input into the NAD. These heightened standards applied to politicians are not meant to imply that other public servants or citizens are less important, but rather to ensure that those who occupy positions of significant power and responsibility are held to the highest ethical benchmarks. This distinction underscores the importance of maintaining public trust and ensuring that those who represent and govern have demonstrated unwavering commitment to ethical conduct and accountability. Take, for example, the controversy surrounding Hillary Clinton's private email server during her tenure as Secretary of State. Clinton used a private server to conduct official government business, raising concerns about the security of classified information and whether she complied with federal record-keeping laws. The controversy grew when it was revealed that around 30,000 emails had been deleted from her server, with Clinton stating they were personal and unrelated to her work. This decision, however, fueled accusations that she was attempting to evade further scrutiny and potentially conceal improper conduct. An FBI investigation later revealed that some of these deleted emails did in fact contain classified information. The FBI concluded that, while Clinton had been extremely careless with classified information, there was no basis to pursue criminal charges. The deletion of the emails, however, remains a significant point of contention, as many critics argue that it illustrates an effort to obstruct transparency of both Clinton and the FBI. Under the Civil Code of Conduct in a stratocratic system, such actions, including the deletion of incriminating evidence and alleged internal protection by law enforcement, would be subject to intense scrutiny. If proven that Clinton deleted emails while receiving favorable treatment to evade prosecution by the FBI, the National Accountability Database, NAD, would document these violations, and severe consequences would follow, including revocation of citizenship and imprisonment of all involved. The NAD would also ensure that all records of these events remain publicly accessible in perpetuity, reinforcing transparency and accountability. Just as we expect and enforce high standards for those in our military, the same logic demands that our politicians be subject to elevated oversight and consequences. There must be no exceptions in our commitment to integrity and stability.
5. Safeguarding against abuse.
To prevent potential abuses of power within the Civil Oversight Branch, COB, and the National Accountability Database, NAD, several key safeguards must be in place. The COB's operations will be overseen by an independent oversight committee, IOC, comprised of legal experts and civil society representatives. This committee will review COB activities to ensure adherence to ethical standards and legal guidelines. Transparent procedures and regular public reporting will further enhance the COB's accountability, making its processes subject to ongoing public scrutiny. Internal checks and balances will also be crucial, requiring multiple levels of review for significant actions to prevent any single entity from exerting undue influence. The NAD would implement strict protocols to maintain data accuracy and privacy. Accurate and verified information will be prioritized, with measures in place to correct any errors or misinformation. An appeal process will be available for those who feel they have been unfairly targeted, ensuring fairness and providing a means for redress. A robust legislative framework will define the powers and limitations of the COB, with regular reviews to adapt to evolving needs. Public engagement through forums and feedback mechanisms will keep these institutions aligned with citizen expectations and maintain transparency. Routine audits by independent bodies will assess the effectiveness of both the COB, CCOC, and NAD, ensuring they continue to operate with integrity and without misuse.
6. Conclusion.
The establishment of the Civil Oversight Branch, supported by the National Accountability Database, NAD, and the Civic Code of Conduct, CCOC, signifies a critical advancement in ensuring our ethical governance. By providing a robust and transparent framework for monitoring and addressing political and bureaucratic misconduct, these reforms address the immense gaps in current oversight mechanisms and demand a much-needed higher standard from our public officials. This integrated approach reinforces the principle that those who wield power must do so with the utmost integrity and responsibility.
When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Unknown.
Chapter 6. Citizens and Civilians. 1. Introduction.
In a stratocracy, the distinction between citizens and civilians lies at the heart of its political structure. Citizenship is not granted by birth but must be earned through an individual's honorable service. This foundational concept radically alters the rights and responsibilities of individuals within the system, reinforcing the idea that political participation is a privilege tied directly to one's contributions to our nation.
2. What is citizenship?
This fundamental shift reframes political participation, emphasizing that only those who have contributed meaningfully to the nation's well-being have the right to influence its governance. Citizenship is not just about enjoying rights. It comes with the responsibility to protect and sustain the system that establishes those rights. The result is a class of society deeply invested in the nation's success and stability because they've actively worked to support and defend it. The privileges of citizenship in a stratocracy are primarily political. Citizens are granted the right to vote, hold office, and participate directly in lawmaking. These rights are reserved for those who have demonstrated a vested interest in the future of our country. The reasoning behind this is simple. Those who have sacrificed and served are more likely to make decisions that benefit society. In this way, citizenship fosters a culture of protection, responsibility, and ethical leadership, where those in power have earned our trust. Moreover, citizenship is tied to ongoing responsibility. Even after earning political rights, citizens must live by and maintain ethical standards. Systems like the National Accountability Database, NAD, ensure that those who abuse power or fail in their responsibilities have their elevated rights revoked permanently. This continuous oversight ensures that citizenship, once earned, is not a free pass for life, but a status that must be actively maintained through moral behavior. This model contrasts sharply with the U.S. system, where citizenship is a passive status neglected by many. Moreover, in the current U.S. democracy, citizens are granted the right to vote and hold office regardless of their contribution. This is unacceptable. While this promotes inclusivity, it also allows for a disengaged electorate, where many citizens exercise their rights without fully understanding the responsibilities that come with their voice. This new stratocratic model seeks to correct this behavior by ensuring those with political power have a demonstrated commitment to and responsibility for the nation's well-being.
3. What is a civilian?
A civilian in a stratocracy refers to the legal and social status of individuals living within the nation who have not earned citizenship. Civilians receive the same protections and privileges as citizens in terms of legal rights, healthcare, education, and infrastructure, ensuring their basic needs are met and they can fully participate in society. However, the key distinction between civilians and citizens is the lack of political voice. Civilians cannot vote, hold office, or directly influence governance. Civilians are still an essential part of the social contract, offering individuals a stable and secure environment in which they can live, work, and contribute economically and socially. Importantly, being a civilian is not a dead end, but a pathway to citizenship. Any civilian who chooses to serve the nation, whether through military emergency or civil roles, can earn citizenship and the political rights that come with it. This structure provides a clear route for those who wish to transition from being a civilian to a citizen, emphasizing that political voice must be earned, not granted automatically. While civilians lack political influence, they are integral to the functioning of society. The protections and services they receive contribute to their well-being and stability, making stratocratic society one where both classes can thrive. The system incentivizes engagement, offering those who wish to participate politically the chance to do so by serving the nation meaningfully. In stratocracy, the distinction between civilians and citizens promotes a more engaged and service-driven populace.
4. How these classes diverge.
The divergence between citizens and civilians in a stratocracy is not merely structural but ethical, positioning service as the key qualification for political power. Unlike current systems in the U.S., where political rights are granted by birth, stratocracy ensures that only those who have made proactive and tangible contributions to the nation are granted the privilege to vote or hold office. This approach fosters responsible governance, as those who have sacrificed for the greater good are more likely to prioritize the long-term welfare of the state. In our current system, political rights are universal, which, while inclusive, often results in uninformed voters making decisions based on immediate gratification, emotional appeals, or personal biases. This can lead to short-term populist policies that are reactive rather than strategic. Stratocracy corrects this by ensuring that those who govern and vote have proven their commitment through service, creating a more invested electorate. Stratocracy ties power to responsibility, reducing the risk of corruption and self-interest. The relationship between citizens and civilians must be understood as one of mutual benefit and protection, where the citizen safeguards the rights and welfare of the civilian.
5. shifting the narrative of service.
The first step in reframing this perspective would be to redefine what it means to serve the community. In a stratocracy, citizens have earned their rights, and part of their responsibility is to protect those who have not served or chosen a path to serve. This is not just physical protection, but also safeguarding the social, legal, and economic framework that civilians rely on. The narrative must highlight that citizens are guardians of the rights and freedoms of all individuals. By serving the nation, citizens contribute to the structures that uphold the stability and security that civilians enjoy. This means that citizens are seen not just as participants in the political system, but protecting a society where everyone can thrive. This does not diminish the importance of civilians. Rather, it enhances the role of the citizen. Citizens must be seen as stewards of the social contract, responsible for maintaining a system that benefits all of us. This pathway to citizenship remains open to all, allowing them to transition into roles of greater responsibility should they eventually choose. The public must understand that the relationship between citizens and civilians is not hierarchical, but symbiotic.
6. Conclusion.
We must consider evaluating the ethical and practical implications of a contemporary stratocracy. Does this system offer a more accountable and service-driven model for governance? And could it address some of the shortcomings we see in modern democracies today? The answers to these questions may help us rethink how political rights are earned and maintained, leading to a society built on merit, responsibility, and mutual protection.
The safety of the people shall be the highest law. Cicero.
Chapter 7, Shattering Misconceptions and Criticisms. 1. Introduction.
No new system of governance can escape scrutiny, and stratocracy is no exception. Critics will raise concerns about its potential flaws, from fears of militarism and the exclusion of marginalized groups to the shadow of authoritarianism and coercion. These criticisms, while understandable, are rooted in misconceptions of what a contemporary stratocracy truly represents.
2. Debunking the militarism myth.
This misconception is understandable, as the concept of service is often associated with military roles. However, contemporary stratocracy values service across all contributing sectors of society. Now, stratocracy rejects the notion that military power should dominate governance. While military service is one path to citizenship, it is not the only path one may choose, nor is it considered superior. Instead, stratocracy is built on the premise that society is supported by a wide array of services vital to the nation's well-being. The farmer who nurtures the land to feed the nation, the plumber who ensures clean water flows through our infrastructure, and the oil rigger who fuels our economy all play equally critical roles in sustaining the foundation of our society. The criticism of militarism is rooted in the fear that military leaders could monopolize power. In reality, modern stratocracy's merit-based system prevents such an outcome. Contribution is the key, not the uniform one wears.
3. Inclusion and accessibility.
This perception ignores the flexibility inherent in stratocracy, where multiple service paths exist, each designed to accommodate the diverse needs and abilities of citizens. Civil service paths provide opportunities for individuals to contribute without physical demands. For example, roles in education and healthcare provide invaluable contributions to our society. Furthermore, technological advancements open doors to service for those who might otherwise feel marginalized. Cybersecurity experts and engineers are able to serve through skills that do not rely purely on physical capability, but are nonetheless essential to our societal advancement and national security. Modern stratocracy, by its very nature, is inclusive. It offers an array of service paths tailored to the abilities and skills of individuals, ensuring that all civilians have an opportunity to serve, regardless of their personal limitations. The guiding principle is that service should be meaningful and beneficial to the collective, and many options provided ensure this accessibility to all who wish to contribute.
4. Stratocracy versus authoritarianism.
The fear that stratocracy could devolve into authoritarianism is understandable but unfounded. Authoritarian systems often arise when power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few, unchecked by the will of the people or a system of accountability. Our model of modern stratocracy, by contrast, is designed with built-in checks and balances that prevent any single group or individual from amassing absolute control. Merit-based citizenry ensures that leaders are elected based on their contributions and capabilities. However, these leaders are not left unchecked. Oversight and accountability mechanisms act as a bulwark against any potential abuse of authority. Furthermore, the legal, ethical, and cultural framework within stratocracy mandates that public officials, regardless of their background, adhere to stringent codes of conduct. This framework protects against the rise of authoritarian leaders by holding all leaders accountable to a higher standard than typical civilians. In this way, stratocracy maintains a balance of power that is resistant to authoritarianism, while ensuring governance is carried out by those best qualified to lead.
5. Addressing concerns of coercion.
One of the most significant concerns that will be raised by critics is the potential for coercion. Stratocracy emphasizes voluntary service. The choice to serve is just that, a choice. No one is forced into service, and civilians who do not wish to take on this responsibility are not penalized. They may remain free from civic obligations should they desire, without the voice that comes with citizenship. Critics may then subsequently point to the possibility of conscription in times of crisis. However, in a stratocratic system, any draft would apply only to those who voluntarily accepted the responsibilities of citizenship. It is a fundamental aspect of the contract between citizens and the state. With rights come responsibilities, including the defense of the nation if called upon. Civilians who have not chosen to serve remain exempt from these duties, highlighting the voluntary nature of stratocratic service. During national crises, civil and public service roles could potentially be mobilized as well, ensuring that the burden of civic duty does not fall exclusively on military service.
6. The accountability criticism.
Detractors may argue that this modern stratocracy could struggle with accountability, especially when it comes to leaders who ascend through service in non-political fields. Critics may claim that without direct democratic accountability, leaders could become disconnected from the public. Stratocracy ensures accountability through rigorous oversight mechanisms, as discussed in Chapter 5. The Civil Oversight Branch and the National Accountability Database ensure that all leaders, regardless of their service backgrounds, are held to high ethical and performance standards. Leaders are not only accountable to the people, but also to their peers in service, ensuring a multi-layered approach to oversight. Those who fail to meet the ethical standards of leadership are removed from office and stripped of their citizenship rights. This ensures that power is earned, not inherited, and that those in leadership positions remain answerable to the public. The combination of merit-based rights and robust oversight mechanisms makes stratocracy one of the more transparent and accountable systems compared to modern-day governance.
7. The overemphasis on merit criticism.
Detractors may argue that an overemphasis on merit in stratocracy could lead to an exclusionary society, where individuals who may have potential but fall short in traditional service paths are left behind. They might claim that the system is overly rigid in its meritocratic ideals, stifling individual creativity and diversity of thought. Stratocracy's merit-based system is not rigid or exclusionary, but rather seeks to reward diverse forms of contribution. The system recognizes that merit is multifaceted and extends beyond traditional measures of success. Creativity, innovation, and leadership are all valued in different ways, and citizens are encouraged to pursue the service paths that align with their individual talents and aspirations. This emphasis on inclusion ensures that no one is left behind. For those who do not excel in one form of service, alternative paths exist that may value their unique skills. This system is designed to be flexible and accommodating, recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute. This diversity of service strengthens our society by bringing in a wide range of perspectives and talents.
8. Perpetuating inequality criticism.
Critics may assert that stratocracy, by valuing service as a gateway to citizenship, could reinforce existing class inequalities. However, a closer examination of our current system reveals that many individuals in service-related roles, whether military, infrastructural, or emergency sectors, largely come from middle and lower income communities. Stratocracy will only serve to amplify the influence of these voices. In contrast to our current system that prioritizes wealth and connections, this merit-based system ensures that those who have dedicated themselves to the betterment of our society are the ones who are heard. Equality through contribution ensures that everyone, regardless of background, has an opportunity to influence and participate in governance.
9. Addressing the patriarchal criticism.
Critics may then suggest that stratocracy could perpetuate patriarchal tendencies by favoring male-dominated service sectors like the military or law enforcement. However, this overlooks the tremendous progress women have made in gaining equality in these fields. Stratocracy embraces and elevates the hard-earned opportunities that women have fought for, empowering them to take on significant roles in historically male-dominated industries should they choose. The system provides women with the chance and choice to contribute on equal footing, ensuring that their voices are both earned and heard, and that their leadership is recognized through service. If women want to be influential within our society, they must participate actively in the sectors that drive societal well-being.
10. Enforced citizen forfeiture criticism.
Consider a celebrity and a rancher being given equal weight in decision-making. A celebrity's influence is often bought or fueled by their desire for fame. This can detach them from the everyday realities of sustaining a nation that most of us are faced with. Their public platform, while broad, does not stem from direct experience or service to the foundations and institutions that keep society functional. In contrast, a rancher's experience is rooted in nurturing the land, producing food, and supporting the economy, all of which contribute directly to our survival and well-being. The rancher's understanding of practical challenges, from managing resources to ensuring food security, comes from years of first-hand labor, not fame or influence. This difference highlights why individuals whose proactive contributions are tangible should hold weight in governance. While celebrities enjoy a powerful voice, amplified through wealth and media exposure, their understanding of critical societal function tends to be superficial. The rancher's role in sustaining our nation is essential, not performative, and their voice reflects this service-based merit.
11. What determines citizenship criticism?
In modern stratocracy, service is defined as proactive contributions to society's health, stability, and advancement. It goes beyond merely holding a job or pursuing personal gain, requiring active participation in roles that sustain the nation's foundational systems, such as healthcare, education, public safety, and infrastructure. These roles are vital to the long-term well-being of our nation and directly impact its stability. Service is measured by the tangible benefits one's work brings to society as a whole. For example, professions in law. While critical to maintaining order, this industry is reactive in nature. Lawyers work within established legal frameworks, resolving conflicts and ensuring justice. However, this does not equate to the proactive contributions required for stratocratic service. Though it may seem that soldiers, healthcare workers, and infrastructure specialists are equally reactive, the distinction lies in how integral the latter roles are to the continuous functioning of our nation. Soldiers, law enforcement, healthcare workers, and infrastructure specialists engage daily in maintaining the core systems, security, health, and infrastructure on which our society's survival depends. Their roles prevent the collapse of essential services, making them proactive participants in societal stability. Conversely, lawyers engage after a problem has occurred, interpreting then arguing the law to resolve disputes rather than continuously upholding the infrastructure of our society around them. Moreover, the legal profession often breeds a culture where individuals use their knowledge of the law to manipulate the system for personal, financial, or political gain, running counter to the principles of service and accountability. You have but to look at the vast swathe of currently serving politicians to see this. Citizenship in stratocracy involves direct proactive engagement with society's essential structures.
12. Conclusion.
Stratocracy, in its modern form, is not just a system of governance, it's a vision for the future. It challenges us to rethink what it means to serve, to lead, and to be a citizen. As we face increasingly complex global and domestic challenges, can we afford to rely on systems that prioritize popularity and privilege over merit and contribution? Or is it time to embrace a model that empowers those who've proven their dedication to the greater good? The path forward lies not in the status quo, but in reimagining citizenship for a new era, one that asks more of us, but, in turn, offers the promise of a stronger, more unified nation.
The first requisite of a good citizen in our republic is that they be able and willing to pull their own weight. Theodore Roosevelt.
Chapter 8. Rebuilding a Nation. 1. Introduction.
The first step in transitioning from our republic to stratocracy must be rooted in the legal foundation of the nation. Constitutional amendments are necessary to enshrine the principles of service and merit at the heart of citizenship and leadership. As previously discussed, these reforms should focus on reclassifying what it means to be a citizen, who can vote, and who qualifies to hold public office.
2. Amending our founding document.
Amending the Constitution to define service as a prerequisite for citizenship is the cornerstone of modern stratocracy. This change will redefine citizens as those who've served the nation, whether in the military, healthcare, education, or other boots-on-the-ground capacities that contribute to the well-being of our society. To amend the Constitution, public support must first be rallied, as the amendment process will require significant political maneuvering, beginning with framing this shift as essential for the survival and future of our nation. The language of these future amendments should be clear and concise, focusing on redefining voting rights. Only those who have completed honorable service should be eligible to vote in city, county, state, and federal elections. This doesn't diminish the rights of others, but elevates those who have proven their dedication to our country. Setting qualifications for holding office. Public office is to be reserved for those who have demonstrated a history of service. This ensures that leadership is placed in the hands of those with the experience and commitment to uphold the nation's best interests. Electoral reforms mandate that only those having served in qualifying capacities may run for office, preventing candidates from using wealth or popularity alone to win an election.
3. Institutional overhauls and bureaucratic streamlining.
Once this legal framework is in place, existing institutions must be restructured. Civil and military institutions in particular will need to be overhauled to adapt to stratocracy's merit-based principles. The goal is to streamline bureaucracy while creating an environment in which merit truly dictates advancement, free from corruption, nepotism, and inefficiency. Civil institutions such as healthcare, education, and law enforcement will need to be revamped under stratocracy. Bureaucratic positions should no longer be filled based on favoritism or political connections, but by a citizen's qualifications. The National Accountability Database, once enacted, will serve as a tool to track misbehavior and ensure standards are upheld across the board. Healthcare professionals will be monitored to ensure they maintain ethical standards and continue to serve the nation in their capacities. The COB would hold them accountable, while the NAD tracks violations. Educators will play a critical role in stratocracy, as they are responsible for shaping the minds of future citizens. The teaching profession will be redefined as a service path to citizenship, with strict accountability to the Civic Code. Their contribution will ensure that the values of stratocracy and adaptability are passed on to the next generation. Law enforcement, ranging from local levels to federal three-letter agencies, will be reorganized to emphasize the core values that define stratocracy. This involves implementing a merit-based system for recruitment, promotion, and accountability, ensuring that those who serve in law enforcement are the most qualified and ethically sound individuals. In alignment with this focus on accountability, qualified immunity will be repealed. Officers who engage in justified actions should be confident in defending their conduct in a court of law, reinforcing the importance of transparency and trust between law enforcement and the public. Police officers will no longer be trained solely in procedural conduct, but will also receive extensive and mandated education in the law itself, with a strong emphasis on understanding and upholding the constitutional rights they are sworn to protect. This restructuring ensures that law enforcement not only enforces the law, but embodies the principles of justice and accountability that sustain a healthy, equitable society. Military institutions will be restructured to align with merit-based principles, ensuring that promotions and leadership positions are earned through demonstrated service, experience, and proven capability, rather than academic credentials alone. Officer appointments will follow a merit-based system, mirroring the rigorous process used for warrant officer promotions among enlisted personnel. Candidates will undergo thorough assessments, including leadership evaluations, performance reviews, and field-tested skills to determine their readiness for command. Enlisted and warrant officer pathways will be revised to emphasize operational excellence and adaptability, providing clear advancement opportunities for those who show exceptional leadership potential. Bureaucratic red tape will be reduced to streamline decision-making processes, ensuring swift and effective responses to emerging threats, further enhancing combat efficiency and effectiveness under stratocracy. Through these institutional reforms, this shift will not only lead to more effective institutions, but also foster a culture of accountability and excellence, guiding the nation toward a future where governance is driven by the best and brightest, committed to serving the common good.
4. Building public support and overcoming resistance.
The most critical challenge in transitioning to stratocracy is securing widespread public support while mitigating resistance from entrenched interests. To gain broad support, we must initiate a transparent and strategic dialogue that highlights the flaws of the current system with the benefits of stratocracy. Public campaigns should emphasize how stratocracy will not limit opportunity, but rather expand it for those willing to serve. By reframing service as an accessible and honorable path to citizenship, stratocracy appeals to a wide demographic in our nation, from military personnel to healthcare workers and educators. Effective outreach is crucial. The message must focus on the practical benefits of stratocracy, namely political accountability, improved governance, and merit-based leadership. Public discourse should involve educational campaigns engaged in the values of service while highlighting the failures of current politics and politicians. The goal is to foster a culture where service to the nation is viewed as the highest form of civic duty. The majority of resistance will most likely come from career politicians, elites, and certain corporate interests. The strategy to overcome this lies in creating alliances with influential civil service groups and public advocates who lend credibility to the movement. As mentioned in earlier discussions, framing these changes as necessary for national survival and prosperity will be essential. The message must portray opponents as defenders of a failing status quo, while advocates of stratocracy are cast as pioneers of a renewed and stronger nation. The key tactic in building support will be the use of incentives, offering tangible rewards such as educational scholarships, healthcare benefits, and career opportunities tied to honorable service, encouraging participation. This approach will foster a national mindset that values commitment to the common good, making service not an obligation, but an attractive life path. However, should these political elites and entrenched powers refuse the will of the people, the conversation must shift from reform to revolution. Stratocracy is born from the necessity of a government that serves its people, not political dynasties. If those in power refuse to relinquish their hold, despite overwhelming public demand for change, the people must be prepared to take decisive action. This is where our Second Amendment comes into play. History teaches us that when peaceful reform is stymied, revolution becomes not only justified, but necessary to preserve the integrity and future of the nation. In such a scenario, the citizens who have already proven their commitment through service will lead this charge, ensuring that the revolution is driven by those who understand sacrifice and responsibility. The merit of this revolution would lie not in chaos, but in a structured and communicated uprising, designed to restore governance to those who have earned the right to lead. In this way, stratocracy offers not just reform, but an ultimatum: serve the people or be swept away by the force of those who will.
5. Balancing capitalism.
Under stratocracy, the unchecked dominance of hypercapitalism, which relies heavily on consumer manipulation and unethical labor practices, will no longer thrive. In a system where service and merit define citizenship and leadership, corporate influence on politics, and the exploitation of global labor forces for profit will be sharply curtailed. This shift will force corporations that have long depended on hyper-consumerism to adapt to the new reality or face collapse. Stratocracy reshapes the marketplace by fundamentally altering who holds political power while judiciously holding them to a higher standard of behavior. Under this system, corporate-funded politicians are removed from the equation. And as Americans, under stratocracy, become more service-driven and conscious of their contribution to society, hyper-consumerism will wane, forcing corporations to rethink their strategies more ethically. In this new economic order, companies that continue to exploit immoral labor practices or rely solely on mass consumerism will find their market shrinking. Without the hyper-consumption that drives today's economy, businesses will have no choice but to innovate or fail. Stratocracy fosters a culture of accountability and sustainability, where businesses must prove their value through fair labor practices, quality products, and social responsibility rather than sheer profit. Companies that combat these initiatives and continue to exploit unethical labor practices or rely solely on mass consumerism will find their market shrinking as their taxes rise. Additionally, by shifting away from exploitative practices and focusing on domestic production and ethical innovation, stratocracy will help stabilize inflation. Hypercapitalism's reliance on cheap foreign labor and the relentless pursuit of profit often leads to inflated prices and market instability. As businesses are forced to invest in sustainable practices and create goods that reflect actual value, rather than inflating prices through artificial scarcity or marketing gimmicks, the cost of goods will reflect a more balanced and stable economy for us all. The result will be an environment that rewards responsible production while curbing the runaway inflation that has plagued the current hyper-capitalist model.
6. Shifting focus.
Globally, the United States is often viewed as a nation driven by imperialist greed, with companies like Apple and Nike benefiting from low-cost labor in countries with poor working conditions. Additionally, the influence of defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon has cemented the perception that America's military-industrial complex prioritizes profit over peace, often starting and prolonging conflicts like the Iraq War for financial gain. Under stratocracy, this perception will change. While our new foundation will curtail hypercapitalism, it will not stifle the capitalist spirit. Companies will be free to compete, but success will be measured by innovation, sustainability, and ethical practice rather than exploitation and consumer manipulation. Tesla and Patagonia, for example, have already begun to shift toward more responsible business models by investing in sustainable technologies and ethical labor practices. These companies will thrive in a stratocratic society where their focus on innovation and integrity will be rewarded. Companies towing the line like SpaceX will face a period of significant adjustment as they align with the values of our new system. While initially, they may struggle with the new regulations that prioritize moral practices and responsibility, SpaceX's mission to explore and exploit resources beyond our Earth positions it to thrive in the long term. As traditional industries constrained by environmental concerns on Earth fade, space exploration will become a national and global priority, ensuring a stable, sustainable, and prosperous future for us all.
7. A long-term vision.
Stratocracy is not just a governmental system, but a long-term vision for a nation guided by principles of morality, service, and merit. Our ultimate goal is to create a nation where voice is earned, accountability is paramount, and governance is conducted by those who have demonstrated unwavering dedication. Leadership will become ethical as a system based on service prevails. These mechanisms will prevent the rise of weak-minded elites and ensure that the wheel of corruption present in current political systems is broken. Globally, stratocracy offers a model that can inspire other nations. It stands as an alternative to the decline seen in our republic plagued by greed and corruption, offering a new vision for governance that could reshape global politics forever. 8. Conclusion. By implementing constitutional amendments, institutional reforms, and a transparent push for public support, the nation will be able to transcend the inefficiencies plaguing it now. How long can we afford to let political elites, driven by self-interest, steer the course of our nation? Through an emphasis on accountability, moral and ethical leadership, and a restructured capitalist economy focused on sustainability, Stratocracy promises not only to rebuild our nation upon a greater foundation, but to create a future defined by integrity, responsibility, and the merit of those who have proven their commitment. Will we allow the current system of greed and favoritism to persist, or will we rise to the challenge and reshape our future?
We are, all of us, responsible for the good we could have done, but did not do. Voltaire.
Chapter 9, Our Republic is Dying.
Our republic is no stranger to challenges, but never before has the threat to its survival been so clear, so inevitable. The pillars that once held it high, trust in government, public engagement, and political accountability, have been destroyed. History reminds us that no democracy nor republic is immune to decay. From the fall of Rome to the collapse of Athens, they die not with a bang, but a whimper. Our nation, too, stands at this precipice. The warning signs are undeniable, yet those in power continue to reassure us that everything is under control. They promise reforms but deliver more of the same. Empty rhetoric and divisive lies. What is a republic if its leaders are not accountable to the people they serve? Today we see career politicians using their office to shield themselves from the consequences of their actions. The very idea of public service has become a mockery. Elected officials no longer fear the repercussions of their failures because the system is designed to protect them from the people they're supposed to serve. Our current system lacks mechanisms like the civil oversight branch that would hold leaders accountable. Instead, the rot of corruption spreads, unchallenged and unnoticed by a public that grows ever more disillusioned as they struggle to live and survive. Look at any election, and you'll see the illusion of choice. Voters are given the option between two parties that, at their core, share the same interest, maintaining their grip on power. The policies may shift from one side to the other, but the outcome remains the same. A republic that edges closer to collapse as leaders choose short-term gains, driven by rhetoric over long-term stability built on capability. This controlled decay is passed off as governance, but in reality, it's the slow bleed of a dying republic. The people are left with little more than the illusion that they can change anything with their vote when the reality is far more grim. Apathy and ignorance have become our greatest enemies. Too many citizens are unaware of the consequences of their indifference. They do not know the price of freedom because they have never had to pay it. Our republic is dying, not because of an external threat, but because many of its citizens no longer care to preserve it. In this vacuum of responsibility, corruption thrives. Politicians no longer fear an informed and engaged electorate. They fear nothing at all. And as public apathy deepens, the final nails are driven into our nation's coffin. Yet all is not lost. There is a way forward, a way to reverse the decay plaguing our nation. Contemporary constitutional stratocracy offers the hope of a future where leaders are chosen on merit and service, where accountability is not an option, but a requirement. It is a system designed to prioritize the long-term stability of our republic over the survival of small-minded, corrupt individuals. Only through service can one earn the right to be heard, and only through accountability can our republic be saved. The clock is ticking, and with each passing day, our current system edges closer to collapse. But there is still time to turn back, to choose leadership that has proven its worth, rather than one bought and sold by greed and power. The future of our United States lies not in the hands of career politicians or lobbyists, but in your hands. If you believe that this nation deserves to survive, if you believe that the principles of our Constitution are worth saving, then now is the time to act. The choice is clear. Either we continue down this path toward inevitable collapse, or we embrace a new future, one built on service, integrity, and accountability.
With great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben.
About the author. I grew up on a ranch in rural New Mexico, where the solitude of a neglected childhood made me feel like an outsider from an early age. Born prematurely with mild cerebral palsy, I had to overcome several physical challenges, including flat feet, strabismus, color blindness, and mild scoliosis. My coordination issues made me clumsy, and my lack of depth perception kept me from joining in on sports without being ridiculed by my peers. School wasn't any easier. Kids called me the cross-eyed weirdo with the notebook because I was always scribbling in my journal or talking about abstract ideas like honor, aliens, and the meaning of life. Writing became my refuge, the place where I could explore ideas and feel connected to something bigger. From a young age, I was fascinated by history and felt a strong desire to serve my country, further inspired by the service of my father. This sense of duty became even more intense after September 11th. I first tried to join the Marines, but they rejected me outright because I was honest about my conditions. Undeterred, I turned to the Army. I then lied about my condition, determined to find an in as I long sought brotherhood and purpose. After navigating 12 medical waivers and with the help of a supportive recruiter, I was finally accepted. At 17, with my dad's permission, I dropped out of high school and enlisted as a 25 Charlie radio operator. Though my medical issues limited my options of being an 11 Bravo, I was still eager to serve and proud to wear the uniform. My desire for a more active frontline role led me to volunteer for the Ranger Regiment. I was determined to push myself. It then took me 4 long, grueling months to pass airborne school. My instructors saw my persistence and grit and didn't send me back to the regular Army, despite my constant struggles and injuries. I made it through, but when I reached the Ranger Indoctrination Program, RIP, I encountered even more serious physical setbacks. After 2 injuries, the medical staff gave me a hard truth. I would never be a Ranger. It was a pivotal moment for me, finally digesting my own limitations. But it didn't stop me from serving. I returned to the Army as an airborne qualified 25 Charlie and spent the next 8 years in special operations support, working in 1/12th signal detachments across both Europe and South America. Throughout my career, I deployed multiple times, notably working as a communications liaison with New Zealand's Task Force 81 in Afghanistan. These deployments were rewarding experiences, but overall, my nearly 10-year service inevitably came with a difficult cost. My injuries mounted over the years, and I was eventually medically discharged because of them. Since then, I've dedicated myself to writing while working toward an English degree, with hopes of one day becoming a teacher. In my spare time, I care for a growing number of rescue animals, a small zoo of sorts, which has brought me new purpose and joy. Writing continues to be my passion, and I hope one day to inspire others through my ideas and the life lessons I've learned along the way. I write this book to honor the sacrifices of all who have served, are serving, and will serve our great nation. You deserve better leaders.